Hi folks, welcome to the next edition of Serverless Craic. We're back on again in the new year. Looking forward to it. How are you keeping?
Oh, good. Getting after it. Dave.
Not too bad. Trying to establish some good January atomic habits. It's slow going though.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, just getting out of bed. It's my first atomic habit. All right. So one thing we decided we would kick off the new year with is we've kind of been kicking around this term with the modern SDLC, the software development lifecycle. We've kind of noticed is changing a bit. And it's I think when you like with what we're doing, what we see companies doing is once you get into this kind of new way of working, there's probably a different way of getting things going. It's no longer like a straight waterfall. It's just, A, B, C, D anymore, or you just keep going in an established system like SCRUM, just keep iterating. How do you get to this kind of fast flow kind of state? And I think there's definitely a lot of things that we've been discovering over the past couple of years that we've noticed. We thought we'd maybe just talk through the phases. What do you reckon? So our kind of modern software development lifecycle.
Yes. I mean, I think first and foremost, I think it's always good to kind of structure your SDLC or kind of at least understand the high level phases. Because obviously one of the things that we kind of like to talk about, we've talked about it in previous kind of episodes, is engineering excellence. So how do you understand how you're doing as an organization, as a collective? If there's no consistency or structure in terms of how you maneuver or how you kind of release software. So I think the first and foremost, the thing you kind of draw attention to is it's good to kind of have and acknowledge a shape or structure to your SDLC in organizations. So that's the first point.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that in the modern cloud it is different, and especially now that so many of these techniques and capabilities and services that we leverage now have been democratized. You can stand them up really rapidly. That's different, right? But it still takes time and being methodical and being deliberate about setting up yourself for success. So I think stuff we're going to talk through, is really about trying to set you up for success properly before you start iterating really quickly.
Yeah, and as well, I think struggling how to phrase this. In traditional software, there was things that you spent a lot of time doing, like say setting up your deployment pipelines. You maybe could have spent months doing that, like way back in the day.
Yeah.
When these things can be done very quickly, you can spend your time doing other things. Like we did a lot of time around kind of domain-driven design, and that's always things that you should have done in the past, but you often never got to it because you were doing other things like setting up infrastructure. So I've certainly, it feels like people going, well, that's why are we doing design? Is that not quite old-fashioned? It's like, no, we always should have done design, but now we need to focus on it more because the heavy lifting things kind of gone away. So we need to focus on kind of our side of the responsibility line, which I think is quite a subtle thing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, so assuming there's always some sort of vision or kind of some sort of end where you want to be, so your business or someone's invested in someone to write this software, somewhere I think there's a good idea or a problem to be solved. So I think the first phase we kind of in our SDLC we talk about is kind of our business architecture, so how does our software model the real world? So there's a number of techniques and stuff that we do up front, so we'll go through a phase of product discovery. We'll use various techniques, sometimes impact maps, for example. What's the shortest route to our success to solve this particular problem? Are we thinking about it? Are we modeling it in terms of business terms? Ubiquitous language. Then we go into kind of like domain-driven design types.
I would say even before that is, do we all understand the problem? Do you know what I mean? Do we have a North Star? Is the problem being, sometimes you're kicked off in a project and the problem hasn't really been well defined.
True.
There's debate on what the problem is.
Yeah.
Sometimes the discovery can also maybe include just getting a bit of agreement. What the problem were, our North Star, effectively, what's the North Star? What's the thing we're trying to solve here?
Yeah, and I think and also in that product discovery, some of the techniques we maybe used in the big old SOA systems or business process management systems in the past the techniques and the approaches are starting to re-emerge, especially with the collaborative tooling that you have now, Miro or Lucid Charts or whatever, right? You can very rapidly use some of those techniques to sketch out what is the business process for the problem you're trying to solve, or what is the, who are the actors, who are the people that you're going to collaborate with to deliver this, So I think some of those things we're starting to see that are starting to emerge, where BPM is not a bad word in the modern cloud world, right? It's just you have different tools and techniques for doing it.
Yeah, and Mike, you're about to jump on the DDD, but before you jump into that, there's something like these are blocking phases. I think you sit on this for months, but I think if no one knows what these things are, it's good to acknowledge that we're in the dark here. Just that we know we're in the dark. It's not that you don't know, it's that nobody knows. That's a really important distinction at this phase.
Yeah. I kind of feel like it's almost big picture, isn't it? It's the, how does what we're doing relate? What problem are we solving? What language are we talking in? And like I always kind of like coming out of this phase with your first consumable feature. What's the first thing we actually want to build and get out in front of people? I think it's good to spend time on that up front and not kind of leave that too late in the kind of the overall SDLC. But then in order to kind of go with that, you mentioned there like the domain driven design type things, like in a lot of cases you're normally working into a bigger ecosystem or a part of a bigger platform, or or you're at the beginning of that journey. So it's good to then think about like how do you model the domain that you're in and make good decisions with relation to that in terms of how your stuff fits in with the overall kind of system and things that are in the overall kind of enterprise.
And I think getting those domains and those bounded contexts well defined and understanding where the boundaries are is critical, and understanding what the capabilities are of the things that you're going to collaborate with is pretty important. Right? And then even thinking about what way is the data flowing through that, and have you modeled the data, and what's the handoff and what's the transformation of that data through this new sort of domain or this new bounded context that you're starting to deal with.
Yeah,
that's a super important one for me, actually, the data modeling and doing that as early as possible, because I kind of feel like, particularly in modern architectures, where we're using kind of NoSQL, or teams might be using DynamoDB, and even thinking about your access patterns up front, but then there's also other dimensions of the business you got to factor in early on, like your reporting or your business intelligence. So the earlier you can kind of do some of that data modeling stuff, it pays off.
And even just an entity, just figuring out that this data entity is owned by that business bounded context, and even making that call that, okay, this one owns it. So if anybody else wants to use it, you got to get it from this single bounded context. That's massive, like
100%. Yeah.
And even thinking about what's the business intelligence dashboard going to look like for the thing that you're just going to build. It's almost like working backwards from that. What are the metrics that are going to show up in some dashboard somewhere whenever you do deliver this capability or feature or product?
Yeah. So that's your first phase. I kind of feel like a good modern SDLC. So coming out of that, your domains, your bounded context, your first consumable features. You may even start to think about some of your example maps, or you're thinking about how you're going to test this thing as well, aren't you? In the areas of impact. That kind of then sets you up for a good technical architectural phase, doesn't it? So, we had, typically we're always talking about well architected. We've done loads of episodes on well architected. So this phase is kind of where we would start to really look at how do we make this a reality in terms of the technical side. So we run well architected threat model exercises. We begin to then think about our pathway out to prod in terms of like accounts or pipelines, those sorts of things, don't we?
And it's not massive amount of big upfront architectural design. It's your first evolvable architecture that you can that can get your valuable feature out to production, right?
Yeah. And and really the thing is here, it's not write a 100-page document and all things you can do. It's like you now have an idea what you're going to build, so we can through architect and say, is this thing, have we thought about the 5 pillars from a threat model perspective? Have we thought about risks and mitigations? And then using your developer platform, can you provision the thing quickly, or can you push something out? So just getting that stuff set up that there isn't like a massive rock that you've missed, like something insane. So even if you get that set up, That's effectively architecture. It's not drawing a diagram. It's thinking
Yeah.
about some of your big non-functional things and just having confidence that you've got them solved nice and early. Because if you don't, it's very expensive to go back to them later on.
Yeah, 100%. And again, as you say, like this doesn't have to take a long time. Like,
No.
if you've done the first phase right, you've got a good grip of your first consumable feature, the threat model, the well-architected review, even getting in front of some of the actual, like sometimes saying evolutionary architecture type concepts, it's good to get the hardest problem out front first and get that solved first. Like so it's good. It's good to kind of be prepared in that regard. And this is a really good investment for
Yeah.
the next phases.
It's a very different way of working as well. Like it's not big design up front where you do every single decision up front, and that messes with people's heads if people have done that in the past. Because I think there's two types of people who want everything designed up front, people want nothing designed up front.
Yeah.
And the truth is somewhere in the middle.
And I think in modern organizations who are leveraging cloud capabilities, a lot of the guardrails and the controls and checks and balances are built into the ecosystem as well. So at this phase, you want to just make sure do you have your infrastructure code? Do you have your static analysis? Do you have your security checks and balances? Sort of at least aware of them, at least understand how the ecosystem can give you feedback in those things.
That's a good one because when you sit and talk to the teams, you're saying there's a whole bunch of things that we have turned on in production when you get to production. So it's not like this is just a one-time check that goes away.
Yeah.
If this thing's not done, there'll be a dashboard that'll be pinging saying there's something, there's something not right. Like, so for sure.
100%. And then again, this doesn't even have to involve architects, people who are seniority. This can all be done by the team themselves. Architecture can be leveraged sometimes if there's something genuinely new or something reasonably complex that maybe haven't encountered, or it's it's new to the org. But this is all.
Architecture should be there to help enable the teams to do this.
Yes.
Pretty much self-serve and do this in a very autonomous way.
Yeah, 100%. So coming out of that phase, so we've done our business architecture, we've got a good grip on what we think the dimensions and things that we've got to get in front of with the technical architecture. Then we kind of get into our, our build phase, or we like to get our first consumable feature out to prod, don't we? So that's kind of where we'll think about like our implementation, and again, every implementation is different, and every implementation will have its own kind of approach and requirements, and so we kind of like to. This is where things like having good understanding of testing and good expectations around the overall enterprise patterns are useful. If your EDA, or what are those patterns, making sure teams can kind of leverage them and apply them in terms of their implementation. But coming out of this phase, you should have kind of early kind of workloads, working versions through dev tests out into production that all kind of are built against all the prep you've done with your well architected your business architecture phase, and you can begin to be fairly confident that you're in the right kind of space and zone. The one thing I would say about this phase is I'm a stickler for telemetry observability. I know that's in well architected, but there's never any excuses for releasing without eyes on and good telemetry, and being very clear about what your success measures are, so you can begin to then see if the thing's actually doing what it needs to do. So the third phase is kind of where the engineers really go off and build a thing to what we've done before. I don't use.
And I think it's being deliberate and methodical about building out a reliable pathway to production.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't be bad ad hoc or on the cuff. It should be, this is our golden path to production that we're going down lots of times.
So just to step back there was 3 phases there. There's almost like that, like ideation, like what are we going to build, and let's figure out what the problem we're solving is. What's the architecture foundation around how do we set up our non-functional things to make sure they're right, and then the actual kind of early build, that pathway to production, build a workload and get it out with all your observability and quality baked in, etc. And
a lot of this is
Mike refers that. Mike, your name for that? I can't remember what it is.
It's the slow is smooth and smooth is fast kind of approach.
Slow is smooth. So I mean, I think some people think this sounds quite slow, but it is slow and smooth. It's like figure out your problem, make sure your foundation is right, build the simplest thing you possibly build, get that right, and once you do that, then you're in the smooth as fast. Then you speed up. It does sound a bit like it's counterintuitive, but a lot of those things that we talked about in that sort of ideation and that foundational phase, it's very hard to retrofit those later on.
Yeah.
And what you'll have achieved there is you've massively mitigated the risks of project failure or product failure, because you've set up all this stuff now. Now you're in the fast feedback time.
No, 100%. I think that's the thing. Those first three phases is the slow is smooth. And you said, and the key point you made there, Dave, is the smallest possible thing you want to get out as quickly as possible. You know, the thing you think it'll be we call it the first consumable feature. That's certainly what I've been referring to it as, is something that somebody's going to try and use, or you're going to try and put in front of a customer or an operator or someone, and getting that feedback. And then that puts you in a position where you've got your telemetry you can observe, you've got your stable pathway to prod, you've got a good grip on the business architecture, the business understands what you're doing, product understands what you're doing. And then you can, we move into our, smooth is fast phase, where then you can start to take feedback, release small features frequently, iterate, get rapid feedback, A/B tests, all those sorts of techniques, all those good modern techniques, leveraging your pipeline. You can deploy 10 times a day, get that feedback, and then build rapidly. But at Mark saying you've taken care of all your risks. You're working to the organizational kind of standards. You're well architected. You're secure. You're in really good shape.
And importantly, you're getting that first product feedback from real users. Are you on the right track? Is this completely off piste, or is this actually aligned to what the product vision is, what your North Star is, what those key input metrics are, your business stakeholders, your users are actually expecting?
I mean, I say that I would love to do some more on this concept, but there's a couple of almost like if you play devil's advocate, you could say, well, why do you need to do this? Remember the old agile thing, build the right thing and build it fast. I mean, this hopefully stops you building the wrong thing. There's so much power in the modern cloud today. You have so much at your fingertips. If a team don't know what they're doing, they can create a lot of damage by not doing this early stuff. So you almost want to kind of measure twice and cut once. With how the cloud is, I mean, if you don't put some key things in place, you could go a long way down the path and realize something goes wrong. You have no idea what happened. So there's a lot of stuff that as Mark, as you said, we're mitigating risk by putting stuff in early. So it is. I think it's a super interesting model. I think there's a lot more we can do on it, and we should do more on it. But it's a very different way of working than maybe people traditionally think.
Yeah, and just to finish off, the slow smooth phase, really, you're talking about rapid feedback from your real users, right? And you're getting that customer input, the business input, right? You're thinking about what's the next most highest priority thing we can develop as a team, right? Now you're focusing very much on business value, product value. What are the most important things we should do? What's our next best action here? And you're really, because you've built all the observability and the telemetry and you have those metrics, you're now able to measure success against tangible empirical things, right? That's really important. Fast feedback's really important. And then you're thinking about, well, especially in the cloud, things never stand still. So there may be emerging threats or emerging cost optimizations or things that you can take advantage of, or new capabilities or services that come online from a cloud provider, but also in your ecosystem. So you want to think about, well, how do we adapt to that? How do we evolve our solution to improve, right? And ultimately, that observability is critical, right? Having that real, rich, across your entire stack, that telemetry and that observability will really help you succeed.
And as well as, Mike, as you said at the start, I mean, you're defining this SDLC. So, I mean, even if you've got a couple of teams, 6 or 7 teams building 4 things, you want those 4 things to kind of behave and feel the same. You don't want 4 completely different things. So even having some, I'll say the bad word, having some standard with how we build is super important, that we're all kind of working in the same way, so.
No, and then that helps you as an organization, doesn't it? So you can observe how your teams are kind of progressing through the phases, and then what story does that tell? Is there areas that we need to invest in from a support perspective or provision perspective? And what are our teams' feedback on those areas? So it's that way to measure.
Yeah, it gives you direction for enablement. So that's the crack then. That was a quick intro to kind of our modern SDLC. We'll definitely do a bit more on that. I think it's interesting. I think once you get the foundations of being in the cloud, then there's a lot of questions around modernization and what does that look like. So it'd be good to kind of do a bit more on this. But have a look at the serverlessage.com at our blog, and give us a follow or like on Twitter at the Serverless Age. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.